Hello, and welcome to our second ever DPMR webinar presented by the Donner Party Mountain Runners. Last time around, we chatted with Helen Pelster and Adam Kimball about their TRT FKTs, and we're going to continue this theme by sharing a conversation with Renee Elsdon Jacobs, a Truckee, California local and DPMR board member, who recently set 2 FKTs in the Sierra. First, a supported FKT of California's 14,000-foot peaks, of which there are 15, Mount Whitney being the highest, and hilariously enough, by far the easiest. And 2, most recently, a supported FKT of Steve Roper's Sierra High Route, which is a north to south or south to north route through the Sierra, starting, well, I guess it depends, but Renee started in Twin Lakes above Bridgeport and ended at Rhodes End in Sequoia National Park. This route was discussed in wonderful detail, or I suppose Renee's route was discussed in wonderful detail on the Mile 99 podcast. So if you're interested in additional content on this specific FKT with the specific athlete, you can check that out there. They also have tons of other great episodes, so check those guys out. Friends of our club. We're going to focus on Renee's running life and the Sierra High Route FKT here today, and circle back to discuss the 14ers. So if you're super into that, we'll get to that later. Stay tuned to the Donner Party Mountain Runners members newsletter for all that information, including how to get this episode as a podcast, how to tune into that 14ers discussion, and to sign up. If you're not a member yet, you can go to donnerpartymountainrunners.com, sign up to be a member. It'll give you everything you need. Renee, welcome and thank you for your company today. How are the legs feeling?
Thank you, Chris. I would usually say that they actually are managing pretty well, except that I did a really silly at-home strength workout with like lots of jump lunges and all this stuff that I don't normally do because it was too smoky outside. Yep. And so now they're killing me. I finished the FKT and I, like my legs held up. I wasn't sore but apparently I can't do jump lunges.
Yeah. For all the people, I find this very interesting because I talk with a lot of people as an endurance runner myself that are like, I can't believe you ran X amount of miles. And when in reality, it's like the 20-minute body weight freak out workout of the day stuff that leaves you limping for 3 days. It's not the long runs. It's not maybe I haven't done anything resembling a Sierra High Route FKT, but the kind of stuff that we do typically doesn't hurt like that.
Yeah.
At least not to me anyway. Yeah. So I hope you recover in style from the jumping lunges.
Yeah.
We're here to discuss the Sierra High Route and your new supported FKT of that route. Could you give me like a elevator speech introduction to that route for people that aren't familiar?
Yeah, so this comes up a lot because apparently a lot of people aren't familiar with the route. So the best way that I've been able to figure out how to describe it succinctly is that it's more like the alpinist version of the John Muir Trail. So the people that are really into being up high in the mountains and seeing the more rugged terrain that the Sierra has to offer, this is the one for them if they want a tour of the High Sierra.
That is a wonderful way to contrast it. And actually, I'm a dork, as you know, but the listeners may not. But I have a CalTopo page that's the John Muir Trail north to south, and then the Sierra High Route north to south, just next to each other, so I can kind of compare contrast profiles, stuff like that, just for dorkness. I don't really plan on doing either, but it's just fun to look at and contrast stuff around.
Yeah.
Well, we know so much about, I think it's fair to say a lot of people, if you're listening to this, you probably know what the John Muir Trail is. It's interesting that so many people do that and so few people kind of chase down this alternate. What drew you to it? I guess you're an alpinist, as I know, and maybe that'd be part of it. But
yeah. So the first time I heard about this route, I was in a climbing gym with my climbing partner, and she was telling me about it, and it just sounded amazing. Like just traversing the High Sierra and being up in the mountains the entire time and getting a view of all the great peaks, and I just just sounded amazing. And there are so many times that I'm in the mountains and you end up in these basins that no one ever sees, or at least you're the only person up in there, and and it's just, it's spectacular. It's a completely different thing to just kind of be out in there and know that there's not anybody else around for, you know, miles and miles, and that it might actually be untouched, you know, in the past month or whatever, you know.
Yeah, I'm fortunate enough to spend a lot of time out in the Sierra as well, and I'm constantly blown away. And maybe this is just in recent last 20, 25 years, the use has gone up so much that the stuff off the John Muir Trail at the lakes that you're supposed to camp at, you know, it's a very different wilderness experience than something like a valley through the John Muir or through the Sierra High route that, again, somebody might not have stood there for 6 months.
Yeah.
It's a wild difference, and I can see why you would choose it as a route to do. Why'd you choose it as an FKT?
Mostly because I'm a mom and I don't have too much free time, and it's I actually stood a chance at getting it in the schedule if I did it as an FKT, whereas if I did it the more leisurely, like 3 weeks that, you know, maybe somebody else would do it as a backpack, it may never happen. So.
Yeah, I can totally get that, and that's really funny. Talking about the jumping lunges break, it's like, you know, moms have to deal with so much more logistics mayhem than, you know, planning this run and setting this up and getting to the start line must have been every bit as challenging as getting to the finish line, I would assume.
That's true. Yeah, I definitely spent more time planning than actually running it.
That's a credit to your running speed, I will say. Talking about your running speed, you set a new female FKT for this route, and a time that's within 21 hours of the fastest male time. And I personally am interested in touching on 2 facts about that route's leaderboard on the fastest known time website that I find interesting. You're the only woman to attempt the Sierra High route with an FKT in mind, as far as I can tell. And you're the only woman to submit a time to the community that's been finished. Can you speak to that, or do you know differently to that?
Yeah, well, there's definitely some women that have attempted it. I found some trip reports online of women that, you know, had planned on doing it as an FKT and then for whatever reason bailed. And then I also do know of women who it's kind of on their bucket list, like you know, I listen to there's a podcast that the FKT guys do, and a lot of the athletes, the female athletes that they've interviewed are like, you know, the Sierra High route, I might do that one next. So so yeah, it's definitely on a lot of people's radar, and there have been attempts done, and I think it's just a little bit more I don't know, I get the impression that a lot of people can kind of handle the idea of 24-hour pushes and maybe even like 2 or 3 days, but maybe are a little bit more daunted by the idea of something that might take more like, you know, 5.
Yeah. I mean, I just, as a coach and as an athlete, I know that getting 5 good days in a row of just regular real life training with all the advantages that it provides can be challenging. Getting 5 good days to sync up for an FKT pace type thing is special, you know?
Yeah. Well, and every single, you know, like multi-day FKT that I've done, I've ended up having, you know, there's always weather, you know, smoke or whatever. And so you can't really like find a good window as easily, you know?
Oh yeah, it's way easier to get that, 2-hour Whitney FKT than it is a 6-day Sierra High.
Yeah. Yeah.
The second thing that jumped out at me is that on their leaderboard, you're the only person to post a supported effort. All 3 male efforts on the leaderboard are unsupported. An unsupported 4+ day trot with all of my nutrition on my back sounds like a really bad idea. Is this the final data point we need to confirm that women are smarter than men?
I love this question. Yeah, so there was actually a really fascinating discussion on this on a recent FKT podcast episode, to bring that up again. And Peter Bachman, one of the guys who started and runs the FKT site, he was arguing for people just getting over this whole like unsupported is better thing. Like everyone kind of wants to say they're unsupported, and so they do all these tricks like, well, what if my friend is at the road and he takes a picture of me? Is that going to be supported or unsupported? You know, I want to be unsupported, but I don't want to break the rules. And and Peter Bachman was just like, just get over it. Do it in whatever style that makes sense to you, and just enjoy yourself and stop freaking out about this like unsupported supported thing.
Yeah, this is a longer conversation for a stronger cup of coffee, but the idea that like just the idea that you're doing the Sierra High route and you're like, you know what, I've got a way to make it harder than it is.
Right.
It's already impossibly hard. I'm going to go as fast as anyone has ever gone. That's my plan. And as if that wasn't enough, I'm going to do it unsupported. It just seems like an unnecessary, it's hard enough as it is, you know?
Yeah.
Well,
and the thing that drove me over to doing it supported was that you cross, so I was planning on being out for 4 nights, and you cross a road 2 times. And so I'm like, well, I could sleep in my Sprinter and like, and you know, have like a nice hot meal, and like, well, yeah, that sounds a lot better.
yeah, I'm with you. I try to end my long point-to-point runs at like a store with chocolate milk and stuff. You know, like the best I can do. If you can end at a car with stuff like that, it's as good as it gets. So touching on that, how did your crew support you? Do you feel like the support of a crew was critical to your success? Do you feel like the nature of this route lends itself to an unsupported push, or, you know, how did you look at it?
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. There are definitely pluses and advantages, and I've heard, I can't remember who it was, the argument that if you do it unsupported, you might actually be faster, because all the time just like dealing with crew and all that turnover actually is a time sink. And for sure it was, because I'm enjoying myself hanging out with my good friend Sean in the forest after doing an amazing day and talking to him about how epic it was, and you know, having a nice cup of coffee in the morning.
Yeah,
And,
totally. That's
yeah,
part of the joy of the whole thing. And you mentioned Sean by name. He's a mutual friend of ours and somebody that I have a lot of respect for in the mountains, and as you do. He's got the fastest known time on the high route. Is that correct?
no, Sean has not done the high route. He has the fastest known time on the 14ers, the California
Yeah, yeah.
14ers. Yeah, and among a lot, like the list, he has a long list
Oh
of
yeah,
his,
but he
yeah,
hasn't done the high route at all.
no, he hasn't done the high route. Yeah.
Yeah, knowing Sean, I'm quite aware that he's seen most of that terrain, and I'm sure it must have been, again, like running through that and then sitting down to talk with him about it. You know, that sounds like a fun way to spend your time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so for sure there were some delays in the fact that I was supported because I, you know, was chatting too much. So,
Yeah. Well, like, I know it's the fastest known time. It's as close to a race as we're going to get in the wilderness. But part of this, the joy of all this is to go out there and be it and live it and breathe it all in, you know?
yeah, and there were definitely a lot of decisions that I made to make it an enjoyable experience, you know, to kind of balance out the pain and suffering a little bit with, you know, there's a little bit of pleasure in it. And for sure, I'd say like 75% of the time I was just in absolute bliss during the, you know,
Cool.
during the FKT, which is a pretty good, you know, I feel like if I was trying to actually get the supported, or excuse me, if I did it unsupported and I tried to get the time that the guys have gotten, it would have I just would have been in pain the whole time.
So, do you feel like my understanding of the Sierra High Route is that it's less than 30% trail. It's not super runnable in general. As a mountain runner myself, I tend to aim for objectives that limit the amount of pure running. Like if I'm trying to break an FKT or go fast, I'm not a very good pure runner. So I would tend to aim towards stuff like this, in part because it slows you down enough that it's hard to like be in that type 2 pain out in there. You know, you're not sprinting down from the top of the mountain. You're out for day 3. It limits the output. You can enjoy it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure, Chris. And then, I mean, you and I are on the same page for this kind of stuff. I my body really misses climbing. If I'm doing something that doesn't involve some scrambling, I just kind of like the monotony of just like, you know, shuffling along on a trail for miles and miles and miles. It's really nice to have some scrambling and some cross country traveling and that kind of stuff mixed
Yeah, I
in.
was going to say the cross country stuff. In my Sierra experience, at a certain altitude, it just gets so the ground cover is so uniform that you can have like blissful type 1 running at like a good tempo with no trail at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I've said to someone that some of the best running on the Sierra High Route is off trail. Like, you know,
Yeah, and that's, I don't know if that's like purely in the Sierra, but that's not a lot of mountain ranges that I spend time in. A lot of that stuff is not very runnable. You go cross country off the trail in the Cascades, for example, you're in neck deep brush in 5 feet, you know. So I think that's the best. So I mentioned it, you mentioned it. It's not the route is more than 2/3 off trail cross country. Did you shade your training that way? Did you run, like, how did you break up running, cross country travel, and climbing in training?
yeah, yeah. So, I- just like from late July, or and I'm sorry, from late June into July, kind of is like the uh, 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 like my big days were essentially mountain days. Like I was doing recon trips on the Sierra High Route. I was doing some big days with my friend who just finished the SPS list. By the way, Chris, JD just finished the SPS list.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
JD. That's JD.
Yeah, so like I did a 50-mile day with him, and just being in the Sierra. So it's kind of like, when you start, your training gets specific as you get closer to your event. So that's exactly that's how I did it.
So you did a couple of recons. Had you seen all? Well, I mean, it's not really. You can't see all the high route, I guess. But have you been familiar with most of the zones that you were in?
Yeah, so between various trips that I've done before in years past, I was kind of like familiar in general with the terrain, but then there were definitely some sections that I had never been on before. I mean, this Sierra is just so huge, and I've been a weekend warrior my whole life, and there's just so many places that I haven't seen. So I did recon trips specifically to kind of like hone in on these areas where Roper said, like this might be tricky, it might take a while. So I wanted to get those cleaned up and refined, and have like a exact route figured out in advance for the FKT.
That the what's the Boy Scout motto? Failure to prepare is preparing to fail, as they say.
Yeah, there you
Um,
go. Yeah.
you mentioned Steve Roper, who wrote the book, The Guide to the Sierra High Route. He's a reasonably accessible guy, from what I understand, and I would imagine his insight would prove very valuable to you as you plan this. Andrew Skirka, who's a famed backpacker, also wrote a data book and created a map set that's supposedly quite informative. I have not looked at either, nor have I done the Sierra High Route. But did you chat with either of those guys or anybody else that had done the route? How did you approach that prep?
So those are really great ideas, and I didn't come up with them. So you should have mentioned that to me months ago.
Oh, I mean, I just feel like everybody's on Zoom anyway. It would have been, I mean, I can't imagine it would have been too hard to get those guys for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, that's funny. I didn't even think of that. It was like, why would they talk to me?
Well, now that you've been showcased on the DPMR FKT webinars, I'm sure they'll be queuing up to catch a few words with you. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what having just finished the route, would you have thought that more prep in detail would have served you? Do you feel like is there something that you wish you could have told yourself at the beginning?
So I did actually manage to find a couple of other resources that I used. So there are some people have posted GPX tracks online, even though some of them are really, really bad. You still have to like take everything with a grain of salt. You don't know who did the route and if they actually went the best way or not. But then, like, for example, somebody else actually did a Caltopo map, and they inputted all of Roper's his waypoints. So the route is described by waypoints. It's not a line, and Roper intentionally did this because he wants it to be like a choose your own adventure kind of a deal, like where everybody who does the Sierra High Route is going to take a slightly different route, and there's not going to be any trails developed, and
And if there's Karens, knock them down, all of it.
yeah, right. I was practicing my Cairn killing skills the entire time, all summer. So
Steve would be thrilled.
yeah. Like, Steve, I've knocked down every single one that I could find for you.
See, he'll reach out just to thank you,
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. So we've mentioned Caltopo a couple times. It's something that's very close to my mountain life. As a devotee myself, could you elaborate on that a bit as a shameless plug to your wonderful family?
Yeah. So a lot of people don't know that Matt Jacobs, my husband, started Caltopo. And it's now grown from like his little pet project to like he has employees and it's just expanding all the time. Like right now he just launched basically live satellite imagery to help with the California wildfires so that you can um, essentially look at where the smoke is at any given moment. And I just used it today on a run to try to find one little patch of kind of clear sky around Tahoe. So
Nice.
anyway, it just keeps getting better and better in Caltopo. So what it is an online mapping tool, and mostly everything is free. There are some features that you have to pay for, but I use it for setting my route using satellite imagery is a huge one, and also slope angle shading. So you can kind of avoid cliff sections using slope angle shading. And then the other huge tool that I relied on was checking out my route in Google Earth. And so I would basically like preview my route in Google Earth, and I could see things like, oh, that looks like a little, feature that, like, for example, this, instead of a lovely scree gully, it looks like a massive talus gully, and I don't want to do that. I'd rather, take this slab that's 50 feet over, to the east or something like that.
So you're really
So,
diving in there. You're getting in and making friends with this route well before you got out there.
oh my God, Chris, like literally when I talk about plus or minus 50 feet, like I scanned every single like rock like in advance
Well, I'm very much out in the field. Plans are useless. Planning is indispensable. I prep for all my trips as best I can. You do to a impressive degree, as we just established. I don't feel like that's, I'm not gonna say normal. I don't feel like that's reached a point where that's baseline for the running community, the FKT community. Do you feel like there's a surge coming where people are going to get more prepared? And you and I already have thrown enough shade at ourselves saying we're not pure runners. Give some pure runners the mapping skills and the prep work and stuff like that. Everything we've ever done is toast. These guys
yeah.
and girls are going to smoke everything we've ever done if we ever figure this out.
Yeah, and I see that there are definitely some athletes that just kind of like they just wing it essentially, and I don't know how they can do it. It gives me so much more confidence going out there when I know that I don't know, when I've just studied every last little thing that I
Yeah.
feel so much more prepared.
Yeah, you know what it is for me? It's if I prepare adequately for a run or a climb or whatever, and I go out there with that information, not only that information, but just the process under my belt, I'm willing to understand objective things that are happening to me and view them and then change my plan without emotion. Whereas if I just go out there and hope that everything goes right and I kind of figure it out as I go, I'm much less willing to embrace change and I'm much less willing to bail. I'm much like I'm not as aware enough. And if I do the prep work, I'm willing to be like, look, I'm either equal to this or I'm not, but I'm ready. And that's worth a lot for me.
Yeah, I would say the exact same thing because for sure the plan did not go as, I had planned at home. When I was out in the field, I changed my sleeping spots and because I woke up early and I was going to try to push a little bit farther and God, we're not talking about the 14ers yet, but that one is like
Well, I mean, and
that.
both somebody that spends a lot of time in the Alpine, 14,000 feet, you're just inviting a ton of problems, or not problems, you're inviting a ton of things that could go wrong. But the high route's really high. I mean, you're up in the Alpine. This is not a different sport. You're out there exposed to a lot of stuff. Do you know offhand what your max elevation was, min elevation was?
Yeah. So it's usually you're between like, well, 8,000 and 11,000 like is usually when you're in between that zone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's high. I mean, that's like,
Yeah.
I'm with you. The preparation stuff means a lot to me, and it puts me in a position to succeed. It seems like you do a lot of that as well, more so than I do. But yeah, I just can't wrap my head around people just kind of winging it. And I'm really interested to see as products like Caltopo become more in vogue and people become more familiar with how to prepare for things like this. I feel like the level of achievement in our sport will go up. This isn't like baseball where the rules have been the same forever. The rules are changing. Now you can go out there, you could draw your GPX route and never even look up. You just stare at your watch and know that you're going to be okay at this point.
Yeah. Yep.
I hope you didn't do that. I hope you looked around. It's lovely out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned, about the 14ers and the challenges of being up that high. With this FKT, did you plan specifically for like multiple outcomes, for weather, not finishing due to certain, like, how did you look? Were you just like full court press? I'll see you at Road's End.
Probably the, maybe blind optimism that it's just like, I'm going to Road's End. Like there is
Yeah, cool.
no, but then again, to your point, I had done so much planning. I knew exactly like every single trail bail point option, like I knew all of that stuff, so that like if I did get to the point where, like, for example, I was worried that in the beginning that I might just be walking into a fire and I was going to have to bail because the smoke was so bad.
Yeah.
So if something like that ended up happening, I would have been prepared.
Well, I hope you're listening, kids. Do your homework, because being out in the woods without a map, with no headlamp batteries, you don't know your bail points, and there's wildfires is a bad spot to be in.
Amen, Chris.
Um,
Listen, it's like Smokey but the Bear.
no doubt. We've talked about a lot of the elements of the route itself. I want to talk more about your planning, like, the route, how you approached the route itself, not just the process of planning. You went north to south. I guess theoretically it could go either way, or is it established north to south? Could you illuminate on that?
Yeah. So Roper suggests south to north, and he gives a couple of reasons in his book. But he does also address the north to south option. He kind of like, after he describes the south to north, he describes, like, oh, and if you do it north to south, these are the things to watch out for. But he definitely, he advises going south to north, and the two big reasons that he gives is, one, if you go early season, there tends to be less snow in the south, and so as you kind of like start heading north, you'll give the snow time to melt, assuming that you're going to be out there for weeks. And the other reason is that the sun is, in the southern hemisphere, so if you're going south to north, the sun is going to be behind you instead of in front of you. And so, you don't, I think he said something like, you don't have to walk into its blinding rays or something like that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I can assure you, I recently had a deproach from the Sierra where the sun was at my back the whole way out, and it saved me so much sweat hemorrhaging. It saved me so much, sunscreen stops, all that stuff. So he's not wrong. Why did you choose north to south then?
Yeah, so I thought it would be faster. And the biggest reason is because the terrain on the north side of passes tends to be more technical.
Oh yeah.
So you tend to go slower, which is, when you're ascending, you tend to be slower anyway. And then the terrain on the south side of passes is tends to be more, you'll find scree, or even sometimes amazing runnable alpine meadows like we were talking about before. And so then you can take advantage of being able to run down through the runnable terrain, and when you're climbing up, you're going through the slower terrain. And then, of course, the other advantage is that you can see, like, when you're actually doing a technical pass, like some of these passes are like class 3, and you want to find the easiest way through them, and you can do that if you're looking at them as you approach them versus coming up over the top and then having to like descend through blind through the technical terrain.
I just was fortunate enough to spend some time in Tuolumne Meadows before the wildfires came up, and I'm still aroused from all the fourth class down climbing. So I can imagine, as you choose the Sierra High Road, that if you can climb up the harder stuff, that would be advantageous.
Yeah, and for sure there were only a couple of sections where I would say, oh, it would be more advantageous to go south to north. But most of the time I was saying, this is the way to go. Like, this is so much faster.
Yeah, so your premise played out there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I I sure do hate down climbing anything approaching fourth class terrain if I can avoid it, and I sure do love descending scree chutes. So I think I'm with you.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know of any? Well, I guess I mean I was gonna ask. Do you know of any south to north attempts? I'm sure a bunch of people have if the book suggests it. Do you know of any finishing times and how they contrast within the FKT world?
No, I don't. Yeah,
So
I do
all the
not.
men's times were north to south as well.
Yeah. And I think it's because, like Leor was the first one to set, he did it south to north. And so I'm assuming that is why like subsequent attempts, like if you're trying to beat somebody, I guess you have to do it in their style, I guess, to like, prove that, you know, you actually were faster, I guess.
Um, there's a chat going, and we've got a contribution from Kevin Sawchuk, and if I mispronounced your name, Kevin, I'm sorry. Um, Earlier in our conversation, he said, "Amen to that. Palisade Basin is full of random Karens, signifying only that someone was there." So Kevin was paying attention and is on our
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
He also said, and this seems to be speaking from experience, if you hit the passes at the proper time, south to north, in a good snow cycle, there's a lot of good foot skiing on the north side of passes that bypass the talus. So maybe for a spring attempt, it would be way faster. But once everything's clear, maybe north to south is the way.
Yeah. And there are some, well, and even going up, sometimes there were some areas where I had done recon earlier in the year and it was snow and it was actually faster going up on the snow than, when the snow melted. It's this like annoying, loose, massive talus field, that kind of stuff.
Surely I do. And Kevin mentioned the Palisade Basin. If anybody's tried to gain the crest from the eastern side where there's no more snow, it's a bummer. It's a,
Yeah. Yeah.
So you finished this route that we've talked about casually that people do in weeks as like a bucket list item, and you did it in 4 days, 23 hours, 53 minutes, and that's 6 minutes and change shy of 5 days. How close to that finish did you like drop the hammer? And in my head, I've got you like, brand new boutique running apparel, running flat sixes down the trail to close the gap type thing. Can you walk us through the finish of your barely sub 5 day giant effort?
Yeah, and this was one of the best moments for me on the FKT, because one, I was just in this extreme, intense flow state almost the entire time, and so I'm just buzzing on all of these, you know, like, like um, I don't even remember all of the names of all the chemicals, but like all this amazing stuff going on inside my brain that's better than like any drug you can possibly imagine.
Totally.
Um,
That's why we go.
yeah, yeah, and so basically, when I hit, it's the Copper Creek Trail, and that's the 7 miles until you hit the car. It's downhill. It's a nice runnable trail, and I knew that I was close. I couldn't remember exactly what time I started, so I couldn't cut it too close. And basically, the entire 7 miles, I was doing calculations in my head, like, okay, what does my pace have to be? Am I on track? Am I going to get it? And I'm like, and then there would be a little hill, and I'd be like, damn it, this is not in the calculation. like I'm screwed. No, I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. And and I felt like I was flying.
Yeah.
I felt like I was sprinting the entire time. but of course I'm looking at my watch. I'm like, what? 11 minutes per mile?
Yeah.
It must be wrong.
Yeah. Oh my God. That's the best. I'm thrilled that you made it. I'm thrilled you had that moment where you got down and saw the trailhead and you were sub 5 days and you got to fist pump a little bit. I'm a little concerned that 4 days, 23 hours into an unprecedented ultra endurance event, you're running complex math in your head while running downhill. We should talk about that just as friends. I'm just concerned about my people, but
yeah. Well, I'm gonna say that was the flow chemical. Somehow the flow state chemicals were also, enhancing my mathematical abilities in that moment.
oh. Well, so my next question, you got just under 5 hours. Like we said, you were within 21 hours or so of the fastest mail times ever. one, I guess the obvious question is how low can this go? We talked about how other, more pure runners with better access to tools in time, everything's going to get faster. Do you think another woman's going to beat your time soon? What do you think is going to happen with this FKT?
Yeah, so I am worried that it could be done soon. Um, one is just because I feel like every single human out there, second guesses themselves and doesn't have any confidence in their abilities. And like, basically the minute I finish these things, I'm like, oh, damn it. I could have done that faster if I hadn't slept as long, if I hadn't talked over coffee as long, I
Yeah.
but yeah, so for sure, I mean, I kind of opted for having a more pleasant experience, like actually sleeping at night to try to keep my energy up and not just completely plod through every day. And for sure, if somebody was willing to, like some people do, if somebody was willing to just, sleep 2 or 3 hours a night or whatever, and just focus on cutting down that transition time, for sure they could cut it down.
Yeah, personally, I fall somewhere in between the, like, I'm a pure runner and I have to be like an alien physical specimen to be able to get the FKT, and like I have to be good at sleep deprivation and like acute risk. There's a pie chart in there, and I'm somewhere in the middle where like I don't want to run too hard, but I also don't want it to be so tough that it's about, can I sleep for 2 hours a night for 4 days straight? There's
Yeah.
something in the middle that appeals to me more as an athlete, I guess.
Yeah, and I would have to agree, me too. I'm less attracted to the FKTs that basically require days upon days of sleep deprivation to make it happen.
Well, see, you're a mother, so like you do this full time, the sleep deprivation. So why do it on vacation?
Yeah,
You
right,
uh,
exactly. Yeah.
somebody like Sean takes his free time and will go go do it without sleep, and it's no big deal because when he gets home, he can just sleep for 4 days if he wants.
Right, exactly. No, it's so true. I mean, I have my kid waking me up at like 6 o'clock every morning. I'm like, ah, I need to sleep.
Hey, maybe that's why you got it. Maybe that's why you got it.
Oh.
Like all those years of training, both as a runner and a climber, served you. Maybe being a mom, and just how bad can it be really if you've given birth, right?
Well, I don't know if you've heard that argument, Chris. A lot of people do say that. They're like, yeah, if you've gone through labor, like that on the end of day 5 of an FKT, if like, this isn't hurting. Like, this isn't pain at all. I know what pain is.
Yeah, I have a dear friend of mine who went through a 40-hour labor recently, and I'd love to hot tip. She should be an FKT artist, I think. She would.
Yeah,
She can do that. She can do this.
seriously.
And I'm sure there's lots of, as a male, I'm sure there's lots of women that have been in labor for longer. I'm not trying to diminish any of them. I just want to make sure that I'm being mindful there.
Yeah.
So you went out there, you mentioned that you slept more than some people would. Like, how much time were you moving at night? Did you move mostly at night, or move mostly during the day and then sleep at night?
Yeah, so my strategy was to attempt to sleep, like, I don't know, I've just discovered that in between the hours of, say, like 11 a.m. and 3 a.m., I'm usually not performing as well. Like if I am pushing it all day, usually around 11 a.m., I just start to kind of fall apart a little bit.
Forgive me, 11
So,
p.m.?
yeah, 11 p.m. Yeah, exactly. So if I've been going all day, usually I start falling apart, at 11 p.m. And so that was kind of my strategy, was like, well, I want to try to sleep, in that window as much as possible. But yeah, so there was definitely some night travel. There was a couple of days, start times were normally like, I don't know, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., something like that.
Yeah. If we're for those of you at home playing ultra running podcast bingo, we've reached the point when I've been going all day, I get tired around 11 p.m. If you have that chip, you can play that chip. Those of you playing bingo at home. Not many podcasts where the casual Yeah, if I've been running all day, usually by around 11 p.m., I get a little tuckered out. Rarely does that make the discourse. Um, I can understand getting tired after an all day effort and it being 11 p.m. How did you approach night running and night cross country travel? And I mean, like I said,
Yeah,
you're doing
yeah.
weird stuff at night.
So a really bright headlamp. There's maybe this is, I don't know, the one gear shout out that we won't do is
You can do lots of
um
shout-outs.
I have it's called a zebra light, and it uses these 18650 batteries, which are um, pretty big, but they're really powerful and they have a lot of juice. And the headlamp, I mean, that's another kind of amazing thing about running down the Copper Creek Trail at the end of the FKT is this is at night at 3 a.m. and you like usually you can't sprint, by headlamp, you know, after 20 hours at 3 a.m. or whatever. But the headlamp definitely helps. And the other cool thing about it is that these batteries, there's this little charger. It's just basically this shell that this tiny little thing that goes around the battery. And then I can use it to charge, if my cell phone is dying, or InReach is dying, or my watch is dying, or whatever. So it kind of has this multi-functional thing going on, and all of my gizmos work together, which
Oh,
is
that's
cool.
tremendous. I'm a fan of all those gizmos. I'm not familiar with that specific headlamp, but everything that you've touched on is important to me as a mountain athlete. You've written a trip report about this FKT that goes into detail, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, yeah. So all of the details, because I am, like type A engineer mindset person, and I like I write long trip reports.
Cool.
Like everything is in there.
Yeah, cool. Well, we'll get a link in the show notes or whatever the parlance of this is. We'll make sure it's up on the DPMR website and what have you. But that's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I know there's going to be a lot of people that listen to this and see this that are going to be interested to hear about your gear in more detail than we can cover here anyway. Um, I so I'm still I've got my overview of what this route is, and I keep coming back to like how hard it must have been to push for 5 days and how much you did at night. But there's also so much out there that's wonderful. Do you have like a favorite segment you want to shout out of the route?
Yeah, yeah. So, and of course, part of it is just like your mindset at that particular time. So, like in the morning, everything is beautiful, right? You're like, you're optimistic, you feel great. So,
Yep.
yeah. Um, but so one morning I did the Ducey Basin, which I know Chris, you're familiar with it. I should probably, I don't know, Bishop Pass. Maybe more people are familiar with Bishop
Yeah.
Pass. It's one of the access points to get into the JMT, which is LeConte. The LeConte Ranger Station is like another, maybe if you're familiar with the JMT, you know that area. So Ducey Basin is kind of like right in between LeConte Ranger Station and Bishop Pass. And that's the part of the Sierra High Route that starts in Ducey Basin, and you're just basically traversing around at the base of the Palisades. So the Palisades, I mean, it's just amazing mountains, the 14ers, just, summits and ridges and beautiful lakes and amazing terrain.
Yeah.
And this particular part of the route is just, I mean, you go Ducey Basin and you're just doing all these amazing passes, and you go over Barrett Lakes, and then I don't, it's just stunning cross country terrain. So I
Yeah.
would like, if anybody can manage, there's one other section between Lake Italy and they call it the Bear Lakes Basin, and it's kind of similar, where it's just like these lakes, they're like infinity pools surrounded by peaks. It's like just this, and meadows and flowers and birds and butterflies and like like spectacular stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I've got some pictures of Doozy Basin from various trips of my own that are you show them to people and they're almost sure you're like scrolling through National Geographic feed or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
exactly. It's
and
so good that your, stupid little cell phone camera makes it look like, you've got an SLR, and it's just because it's so gorgeous.
totally. And for those of you that aren't familiar with that area, if you want to look into this, the Doozy Basin is near Bishop Pass, which is accessed from South Lake outside of Bishop. It is right west of the Palisade Crest that includes 5 of California's 14ers, which Renee is familiar with intimately. And that zone is beautiful. And then if you wanted to explore the Lake Italy portion of her favorite passes or favorite areas, that's accessible out of Rock Creek. It is a wonderful ski touring area. If you want to go out in the spring, that's a great place. There's some great skiing above and near Lake Italy. And Lake Italy, that area anyway, I haven't spent a ton of time there, so I'm envious of your run, Renee, because that's one of the few points in the Sierra where it's pretty accessible to get into like the third panel. Like you get over the Front Range and into the second, then you're in this zone that you said doesn't see a lot of people.
Yeah, it's actually fairly accessible and it feels so remote, and like you said, it doesn't see a lot of people. Yeah,
Renee went the hard way, but if you drive up Rock Creek Road, you get to start at 10K. You're right there. It's way closer than Bridgeport, I would think.
Right. Yeah. Definitely faster than starting at Twin Lakes outside of.
Totally. So obviously, I can see you light up as you're sharing these spots. Would you repeat the route again? Do you have desire to go back to these places to share them with Matt and Tyler? Like,
I would love to guide moms on the Sierra High Route. That would be amazing.
Cool.
Yeah. So if there was like a group of moms that that really wanted to get out and do something like this, I'd love to give you an excuse to make it happen.
I'm sure there's going to be some moms following this that will want to reach out, and I'm sure we'll make sure they get connected to you, because I'm sure there's demand for that.
Yeah.
I as somebody, again, no kids, it seems plenty tough to make it all work, and if you've got a resource like you guiding you through something this cool, I think it would mean a lot. So.
Yeah, that's what it sort of is like. My current dream job is like helping moms train and get out in the mountains and like doing guided trips to like up Middle Palisade or something.
Yeah, well, and you touched on it, like demystifying the stuff that's out there and trying to like get people to bet on themselves and carry some confidence, and that's everybody. That's not just moms. It's surely not just women, but like just being able to look at something like this and engage with it and go do it, giving people the push they need would mean a lot. And I think a lot of people can do this stuff. Getting out to Doozy Basin is a hands in pockets walk.
Yeah.
Like people should go. It's wonderful. So yeah, I think that's really cool. And I know there's going to be some people that are inspired by that. Would you do it, like, obviously guiding, it's based on, I guess, the client, but if you were going to do it for fun, would you backpack it? Would you go south to north? Would you do it in segments, or are you just like, I'm going top to bottom, start to finish, full gas?
I know. The funny thing, Chris, if I did do it again, I would probably be doing it again to beat the time of the person that's going to beat me.
Oh man. I don't know I'm fortunate enough to have played in the FKT world a little bit, and the things that I've done really fast, I'm compelled to go back and do like 4 times slower, and maybe do them the other direction so I get the other views and stuff. Like I want the other stuff that I didn't get.
Like the other experience, the other side. Yeah.
Like you said, you were sprinting down this trail that's in a national park by headlamp, delusional after 20 hours of running. There are other ways that are probably more pleasurable to take that in. Right. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, like there is probably a family of deer, 15 feet off the trail, and I just like.
And you're hauling ass doing advanced algebra in your head, just. Yeah, I don't know. I have a strong desire to go back and spend time in these places that, like Doozy Basin. Like I've been fortunate enough to spend some time there, but most of the time it's moving fast in the mountains, and you don't get to spend any time there. You have to like leave or you will die. Like you need to go out.
Yeah. And for sure, Chris, there are so many, like these lakes with these amazing beaches. And it's like, I wish I could just like, sunbathe here for hours and just, or soak my feet and have a cup of tea or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stopping at lakes and stuff. How did you do, I'm most of our listeners know how to filter water in the Alpine. So this isn't like how do you drink out there? But like, how did you approach water? Did you run with a ton of water? Did you run with just filtering capacity and try to stay as light as possible?
Yeah, so I am learning that maybe my strategy is not as universal. That
Okay.
like I have spent so much time in the high Sierra that I maybe am a little bit too comfortable with drinking water that's not filtered. It's faster. So on the Sierra High route, I mean, you are just spending so much time up there. You're basically at the source of the water, and you're usually not in a place where a lot of people are camping and pooping, and so most of the time I'm just dipping my water into the river and drinking the nectar of the earth.
I almost never do that, with the exception of like, go up to the bottom of the Palisade Glacier and like fill your water bottle up with the glacier's melting into your bottle. It's okay to drink that without filtering it. But in general, I filter when I'm out in the Alpine. But you touched on it, like being on the Sierra High route in general, the whole point of the route is to take you away from where it is traveled. So it would be a little bit of a different game on this route, I would assume.
Yeah. Like I would suggest if somebody wasn't used to not filtering their water, that they would probably feel a lot safer doing it on this route versus like for sure the JMT or something.
Yeah, like you could talk me into not filtering the entire way on the Sierra High route, and I don't think you could pay me to not filter along the JMT.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. And again, disclaimer on behalf of our run club: don't drink unfiltered water. Kids, use water filters unless you're at 11K below a glacier.
Right. Right.
Um,
Exactly. I didn't tell you to do it.
yeah, exactly. Um, yeah, man, it's the water. You did this just recently, so the water must have been receding, if not gone, right? Like
Yeah, I was shocked at how many, yeah, so lakes and streams that are marked on the map as being year round, some of them are gone.
oh yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, again, and that's where like I would run with some amount of water, and I always just find it interesting, and especially on an FKT pace, it's like limiting the amount of grams on your vest at any one time goes a long way.
Yeah. So I was doing pretty much the entire time. I just had my two 17-ounce body bottles, and there was so I know you use the Sawyer filter too. The Sawyer filter, I had like a 32-ounce bag that was like my backup. Like if I needed to carry extra water, I could just put in my Sawyer filter bag.
You got an extra half liter back there.
And I've got an extra, yeah, or well, liter. It's a 32-ounce
Oh,
bag
yeah.
is what I use. Yeah. So there was one spot where I actually needed it on the entire time. Other than that, I was able to get away with just my two 17-ounce body bottles.
I actually recently wrote an article for Tahoe Mountain Sports, a local gear shop here in Truckee. For those of you who aren't familiar, Renee, you are, about some water filter technology. And I still love my Sawyer products. Full disclosure, I run for Solomon. They make a water filter now that fits in the soft flask.
I saw that. Yeah.
Quite impressive. And then Ketadin makes a bee-free filter that I think is a really good running option because you can just fill it up while you run, and then the filter's in the cap, so it filters while you drink. You don't have to stop and filter into a secondary vessel.
Yeah, I've seen that too. And I know I've been I've been curious about them, but it's just so funny that I tend not to filter so much these days that I'm not even bothering like exploring these new fancy ones.
Yeah, I have all three and use all three, so we can talk about it later. But they all have very good applications for very specific undertakings in the mountains, I think.
Good to know. Once again, another excuse, Chris. We got to go for a run.
I would love to. That is a wonderful. I would love to go for a run. Do you have any runs or mountaineering? Obviously, we know it's weird. The state's on fire. The world is tearing apart. I know, but let's assume we can plan fun things. Do you have anything that you're chasing down over the next couple of weeks or months?
I'm hoping for a clearing to go for the Desolation 7 FKT. Did you know that was an FKT?
Oh yeah. I've got more than a few. I have friends that have it now. I have friends that are trying to steal it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's just an easy one. It's like, you get a window and you can drive down to Desolation and do it in a day.
Yeah, and that's whether you'd have to twist my arm whether I would consider doing it at FKT pace this fall, but just that's a wonderful day out. It's a beautiful part of our area. So
yeah.
I would do that. I would do it with you. I don't know if I want to run at that pace, but I'll do it with you.
That's what made me think of it as like, that would be a good one to do together.
Yeah. Have you done it? Have you done it?
Well, I did. I've done the plus version, the like
Oh yeah.
the 7+ more. Yeah.
Yeah.
The-
Just adding peaks, doing advanced math. I get it. I know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've done the 12 version or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to Mott's and all those guys, the Desolate Peaks guys.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that's a great one. We talked about the Mile 99 podcast. They already had you on to talk about this and the 14ers FKT that we touched on a little bit. You mentioned Matt's role in the 14ers FKT. Can you elaborate on your partnership, marriage, and like how, like what role, you're a mom, you're a wife, like how does your family play a role in all this athletic chicanery?
Yeah. So Matt might be the most important part of it. Like if he's not on board, basically it's not going to happen. Um,
Would he like disable Cal Topo just to spite you? Ah,
Don't give him the idea.
Matt, please don't do that. I also need it.
Yeah. It's like, why is the server down every time I log on to Caltopo?
Yeah, no doubt.
No, it's more just like if he's not excited about the project, I try not to burden him with my training. Like I figure out ways to do my training without asking too much of him. But of course, inevitably, like, I want to do 3 days in the Sierra, honey. Can you, take care of the kid? And and if he's not on board with the project, he'll just be like, what are you talking about? I'm stressed out at work and I haven't gone on a mountain bike ride in a week. And why should you go have fun when I'm, like, so, we'd like, I have to take care of him and make sure he's in a good place. And for big projects like this, for sure, I need to like get him excited about it and make sure that he's, stoked to help me out.
Yeah, I mean it's surely a lot more fun to have a teammate in your corner. I will say, as a married person. I also I laugh at it's harder to make the pieces fit when your training runs are 3-day Sierra pushes.
Right.
Easier to
Yeah.
sneak out for a 90-minute interval session or something.
Yeah, I know. And I joke with some girlfriends that are like, sometimes it's like, why are we ultra runners again? Like, why can't we just do 10Ks?
Yeah, this is something that we can talk about at length, but I think about this all the time. And Renee, you and I are splitboarding friends, snowboarders. I would say we were snowboarder friends first, quite honestly, if I had to think about it. But I think about this in snowboarding and in ultra running, or splitboarding. I should say alpine splitboarding and ultra running. But like snowboarding was this fun thing that you did with friends at the resort with beer and like all of it. And all of a sudden you're in some 50-degree couloir with technical tools and ropes and you're like, why did we screw it up? Running used to be this joyful like 30-minute out the door, lace them up thing. And now it's this logistics mountain to run for 40 consecutive hours with my friends. We screwed it up is all I'm saying.
Yeah. I know sometimes it feels that way.
Yeah. You were also a mother. I assume you carried the joy of motherhood with you out there, but did you interact with your son while out on this FKT?
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind is I had an inReach, and I fully thank you, Chris, for sending me messages, by the way.
Oh, you're welcome. It's literally the least I can do.
Yeah, so I welcomed messages because it was just like, when I had the time, I could manage to like look at my messages without stopping. And it was just like, I would kind of save it for those moments when I needed a little lift. And like I would basically like, Matt, I need some messages. Like, what did Tyler do today? Tell me, what cute thing did he do today? And, but the other thing is there was actually like, it was like 4 hours. There was this helicopter who must have been trying to find a missing person. There must have been somebody out there that had like, press the spot beat or something. But they were basically flying around me and they were just like following me for hours as I was, doing my thing. And of course I'm like, taking pictures for my, like, tell Tyler I see a helicopter. There's a helicopter out here. I think it's a Chinook.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've got a 3-year-old nephew, and the joys of helicopters and bulldozers, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned Matt's a SAR guy. I'm surprised you didn't like in reach Matt, tell them to stop flying near me. I'm okay. It's fine. For those of the women that are listening to this scheming your run on Renee's FKT, Renee took the time to reply to some of my messages out there in like sentences on an inReach. So if you're looking to shave a few minutes,
Yeah.
don't try to type full sentences on an inReach.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. Goodness. Well, that's really cool to hear that both your boys got to be such a big part of this,
Yeah, and for sure. And Matt originally, so it was, I did it while it was our wedding anniversary. I was actually out there on the day of our wedding anniversary. And originally he was supposed to be hiking in to do my support. He was going to be my support crew on the 2 backcountry nights, and that fell through because of the coronavirus. So he definitely would have, originally the plan for him was to be, even more involved, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that they got to be a part of it, and obviously it did work out quite well for you. Yeah, it's just remarkable, Renee. I think talking about some of this stuff is so inspiring to me. I know it's inspiring to a lot of people, and I mentioned it earlier. Like, what would you tell yourself before you started this undertaking? Like, do you have any advice that you would offer yourself to set you up for something else? And you touched on trusting yourself and being willing to carry that confidence forward. Would you tell anything else to other people that are considering this?
Yeah, well, yeah, the advice that I would think is it's always hard to, let's see, how do I say this? Like, how to take care of yourself, and sometimes it's really easy to forget, and you kind of get in some dark holes sometimes, and you just spiral down, and you've like stop eating, and you stop drinking, and you stop paying attention to your breath, and it's like you have all these amazing tools that you know how to use, and then sometimes you just get in these places that you lose the ability to kind of take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, the one thing that even I would like to tell myself to not go there, like remember, if you see that coming, like, nip it in the butt. Like, don't go there. There's, but yeah, whether or not it's actually possible or not to actually ever stop that from happening, I don't know. But it's kind of like that thing, like Helen Pelster had said, I think her answer was, to focus on the breath or something, like, just pay attention to the breath. And it's kind of, that was the first sort of thing that came to my mind too, was like, don't forget your tools in your toolkit, and because for sure, once you start losing hold of that, it all goes downhill.
I do not know if it's possible to overcome those dark holes, because I surely find myself in every big undertaking realizing that I haven't drank what it was, core temp, whatever it was. But you touched on breath, and I have a daily mindfulness practice. I use breath work in my own life. Helen is a friend of mine. We touched on her breath practice on the talk that we did in the previous episode, and you just brought it up. So I'd love to touch on that a little bit. What I'm interested in is, and I thought about this after asking Helen, I asked her a very big question. I can't recall what it was, but it was something to the effect of like, let's unpack the role of meditation in sport, or some extremely ridiculous question. So I've thought about how I wanted to ask you this. How did you come to breath work? Was it via parenthood? Was it via running? Was it via something else? And then did you take it into distance running, or did you come to it from distance running?
Yeah. So the specific technique that I use now and I rely on heavily is actually this is from Helen. So she turned me on to the breathe in for 3 steps and breathe out for 2 steps. And I love it. You know, ever since I learned that one, I've been using that one all the time. And it's really, really, really helped a lot. So that's like a specific technique that I tend to use while running. But there's also, I mean, breath work is like, you know, this huge universe. And, you know, a lot of times it's associated with meditation. And I do also use meditation, you know, outside of running. I do feel like that breath exercise that I do while I'm running that I learned from Helen turns running into basically a moving meditation. But I do also meditate. I do think that it's really important to meditate outside of running also. And that is something that I really adopted during motherhood. Like I knew what meditation was kind of before being a mom, and I heard people talk about it being, you know, really good and important, and for whatever reason, I don't remember what finally like got me to do it, but when I started doing it as a mom, it just transformed me, you know, my ability to be a good mom. You know, just it's like you just, well, you are actually resonating at a different frequency. Like your brain, when you meditate and once you become a regular practitioner, you are literally at a different frequency. and it just, I mean, it helps just in so many ways.
Cool. Yeah, I share a lot of those enthusiasms, but it was great to hear you extrapolate on them. And you know, it's interesting. You mentioned finding meditation with parenthood. There's a comedian, and I can't recall who it is, so I'm not going to attribute a name, but he made a comment about how parents live for the break between where you close the passenger kid seats door and then walk around to the driver's side. Like that, those like 12 seconds are like going to church or whatever.
No, Chris, I have to tell you a story.
Oh, please continue.
So this morning, you know, my kid is screaming once again. I'm like, you know, like shaken out of bed, like what's wrong? What fire emergency? And you know, kids screaming. It's like, oh, the kid's just waking up as usual. And I really, you know, I really was hoping to manage to get like 5 minutes to myself before he starts screaming at me and I have to run downstairs and be a mom. And then for whatever reason, he stopped screaming, and I was about to go downstairs and he stopped screaming, and I sat down on the couch and I just started breathing. You know, I just started meditating. I'm like, I don't know how long this is going to last. It might be 2 minutes. It might be 3, but I'm going to take it.
and man, you know, I found different breath exercises, ladders and what have you useful. And I'll catch myself like creating reasons for me to put it off. And it's like, all I'm talking about is sit on the couch and breathe intentionally for 15 breaths, you know?
Yeah.
It's possibly easy to do, but it's hard to get you to do it. It's hard to get myself to do it. And so props to you for sitting down on the couch and taking the time. It's not like you need a ton. 16 good breaths. You know, you do a couple 3 in, 2 out that you and Helen have touched on, and maybe that changes the course of the day. You know?
No, for sure. It can be transformative sometimes, just like a couple minutes.
Yeah, totally. And honestly, for me, obviously a couple minutes is great. More time is better. I found a lot of success, even if it's just like 2 deep breaths at a stoplight, where I didn't gain anything. There was no physical payback from such a short practice, if you will. But mentally, emotionally, I know that I've invested in it. Like I really gave it a shot there. I leaned on a good tool and I feel stronger because of it. Just sitting down on the couch to take a few breaths probably put you in a better position to succeed.
Yeah, I know. And there must be somebody's probably already done it. And there needs to be a book of like meditation for real life, you know, and it's that type of stuff, like at a stoplight, or, you know, like just those 2 seconds walking around the car or whatever.
Totally. Well, we'll include in the show notes, but we'll have Renee's, we've got your guide service, and now we've got a book on mindfulness for real life.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I need to write a book.
You're diversifying. This is great. Yeah, I know for me, you mentioned it just making sense to you, the meditation component after motherhood. I know for me, it just made sense once I was able to kind of like reframe a lot of misconceptions about like, I'm not a monk sitting on a pillow for 30 minutes. I'm just going to skip it and instead, pour a beer out or what, like once I got past that, I was able to engage it. So maybe some of this stuff inspires people, sometimes you just need
Totally.
a couple deep breaths.
Yeah, exactly. Like you don't have to wait until you have an hour, in a dark room to yourself.
Yeah, totally. I don't want to keep you forever, but I do want to touch on the 14ers talk, which we will steal another hour of your time later. You and I've had the privilege of climbing all of California's 14ers just in leisure, multi-year style. So it's something that I look forward to talking about with you. What I wanted to ask you is now having done them both, I'm not even going to say as FKTs, having done both undertakings, if you could choose one to recommend to somebody, let's assume they are a climber and can do it safely, because the 14ers and the high route are very different undertakings.
Yeah, yeah, trail runners could actually, do the Sierra High Route. Work on getting comfortable with a little bit of scrambling and you can do it. And that's great. But yeah, the 14ers is it's a little bit more. There'd be some years of working on some skills for that one.
Yeah, maybe we'll just say we'll recommend the high route just out of safety.
Right, exactly. I didn't tell you to do it.
Yeah, totally. But I both routes are incredibly beautiful to me. Anything in the Sierra, I'm interested to talk about. Anything with a friend, especially celebrating the accomplishments that we've touched on, I'm looking forward to. But I'm really looking forward to talking about the 14ers with you.
Yeah, well, and I am too. I mean, and I had like a whole slideshow presentation with these fantastic pictures and all this whole talk lined up, and then the coronavirus hit.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Keep it on ice. We'll find a way to have that slideshow. And until then, we'll have a webinar where we can talk about it. And I know for a fact, both you and I have trip reports. So if people are hungry for content between now and that slideshow, we'll make sure we get them covered.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll talk about that later, but I'm looking forward to it, and in large part because this was so enjoyable. And I know doing it again will be fun. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody listening, thank you for tuning in. Again, we're going to have that 14ers discussion at a later date on the Donner Party Mountain Runners webinars. I'm not 100% sure about this one being on the Mile 99 podcast because you just did one with them, but maybe they are. Those guys are awesome. I'm sure they're into it. But check that out to download this as a podcast. We will post this as a video and a podcast on DonnerPartyMountainRunners.com. If you're not a member yet and want to enjoy all this content, I don't know how you'd be watching now and not being a member, but if you aren't, please sign up. It's what makes stuff like this possible. And yeah, we look forward to more of these. It's been pretty fun. And I'm really biased because I get to talk with my friends about stuff that I enjoy.
Yeah, it was great talking to you, Chris. Thank you. And
thank you for your time. Go ahead.
And your questions were fantastic. So you've got some talents.
I will say if all my guests do cool things in good style and are intelligent, articulate people, it makes the questions quite easy. Thank you for your time and energy.
Thanks, Chris. Till next time.
Till next time. Good night.